In this video, we'll talk about using layers in AutoCAD. Layers are a method of organizing our drawing, and we want to have the drawing organized for a couple of different reasons. We may not want to plot or print all of the information every time we print the drawing, so we can organize the drawing and have some of the things in the drawing on one layer and some on another, and those layers could then be turned off that we didn't want to see. So one of the properties of layers is that they can be turned off and turned back on again. The information on those layers disappears from the screen temporarily until you turn the layer back on again, and then it shows up again. So it doesn't delete it from the file, you just don't see it on the screen. Another reason we use layers is to separate things by color. You can see in the sample drawing that I have up here, this is one of the samples that comes with AutoCAD called DB_SAMP or sample. In this drawing, you've got some things that are light blue, some things that are purplish color. You've got blue and gray. So just by knowing what layer colors we're using, you can kind of tell, once you're used to looking at a drawing, what layer an object is on. And that kind of tells you sometimes what to turn off or what to turn back on again if you see or don't see what you want to see. In order to see what the layers have, what properties the layers have, we have a button up here on our ribbon, and it's this one up here under near layers, and it is the layer properties manager. When I click on this button, it opens up a dialog box that we can see here, and we can see that we have layer names over here. Every layer can have names that can contain spaces, dashes, underscores, and letters and numbers. There's one layer called layer 0 that we'll talk about as we go on. This is a layer that always exists in every drawing. We can't rename it or delete it. It's kind of the basis of the beginning of the drawing. It's what we've been using up till now for all of our objects because we hadn't known that we could create layers. Once we create a layer, it has a name. Several other properties are the layer can either be turned on or off. It can be frozen or thawed. It can be locked or unlocked. We'll talk about all three of those in some depth. It can have a color. You can see that the colors either have names or numbers, and it can have a line type. And the line type in this case is continuous for all of these. Till we get down here, we've got one that has a centerline line type. We'll zoom in on that and see what it looks like. We'll talk about line weight later in the class, but in this video we'll concentrate on just a few of these things. You can see that we have a layer called chairs, and to the right of it, it has a little light here. Looks like a light bulb. If I click on it, it turns dark. Click on it again and it turns light. That turns the layer on and off. Let's see what effect this has. If I turn the layer off and then close this dialog box, I'll zoom in on one of the offices. Here's Eric Washington's office. If I turn that layer back on again, where it says chairs, I'll turn it on, and now we see that there's a chair there that wasn't there a moment ago. Instead of using the full dialog box called layer properties, I'm going to use this one here just called layer. It's a little drop down, and it has basically the same format. It just doesn't have as many controls. In this case, next to chairs, it has the on off button, and again I'll pan over just a little bit so we can see what happens here. But with this drop down, if I turn off the layer called chairs, we'll see that the chairs information went away. We also have one called CPU, a layer. This layer here is for our computer, and if I turn that off, it disappears. If I turn it back on and the chair's back on, it shows up again. When a layer is turned off, it won't plot, you can't see it, and you can't select the objects. So if I went to erase objects and the layer was turned off, it would not be selectable. We have another property right next to that, and it looks like a little sun, and it's called freeze thaw. If I freeze a layer, it's almost like turning it off. You can't see it, it doesn't plot, and you can't select the items. So it sounds as though they're identical, and I'll talk in class a little bit more about the details about what that entails. We also have another icon here for lock and unlock. If a layer is locked, you can't select items on that layer, even if it's turned on and thawed. So here, if I lock a layer, the layer called chairs, now if I said erase and grabbed a bunch of these items here and hit enter, it erased all the objects around here, but it did not erase the chair because I locked the chair layer. So I'll hit F2 to bring up the text screen, and it shows that I did the erase command. When it said to select objects, I selected all those objects and it said 48 were found, 1 was on a locked layer. So it allowed me to select all of the objects except for the one that was locked. If I hit F2, that closes this window. Let me undo to bring that stuff back, and it's not erased anymore. So I can lock a layer and I can unlock it. So we have on, off, freeze thaw, lock, and unlock. If I want to change the color of a layer, I can go back to the layer properties dialog box, and if I picked the chairs layer again, I can pick where the color is over here, and it brings up another dialog box. This dialog box has a bunch of different colors in it. Down here we have several that have names like red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, magenta. Up here we have a bunch that have numbers. You can see that it has the number down here, so that's color 50, above it is 52, etc., and the number shows up below here. So if I changed it to one of these, I might change it to this darker green color, and that is color 82. So again, they can have numbers, or if I changed it to blue, it has the name blue. So you have names down here, just a bunch of numbers up here. Either one is fine. So I'll change it to blue and say OK, and now instead of having that light blue color the chair had, it'll be dark blue when I close the dialog box, and now it's dark blue. So if you change the color of a layer, any object that was on that layer changes also. Another thing that we can do with layers is we can have a layer be the current layer. So if I want to make a layer current in the dialog box, I can pick the layer. Let's say I want this computer or CPU layer to be current. I can select it and then use this green check mark, and it moves the green check mark to this layer, making the CPU layer the current layer. When the layer is the current layer, anything that you draw shows up on that layer. So let's close this dialog box. Now that the CPU is the current layer, let's say I draw a circle in here. Okay, it's on the CPU layer, which was that purple or magenta layer. Draw some lines. Hit enter. So now that I've drawn some objects on this layer, if I made a different layer current, let's say I made this EB core layer current, now if I turned off my layer called CPU, the magenta stuff that I just drew along with the CPU disappears. Once I've drawn some things, let's say I turn that layer back on. In order to make it current, if you don't go to the dialog box, you can just click on the name in this case. So if I want CPU to be current or chairs to be current, the current layer shows up in this drop down, and anything I draw will now be on that layer. So this is now on the chairs layer. If I wanted to move something from one layer to another, if I want to move this thing to the chairs layer or any other layer, I can just select the objects I want. Let's say I pick a couple of items. I can go to this drop down and pick whatever layer I want to put it on. If I want to put it on this green EF door layer, then I just did that. I can hit escape to clear the grips. So you select the objects first, use the drop down, pick the name of the layer you want to put it on. Let's say that I want to put it on the chairs layer, and now the items I selected moved to the chairs layer. So we have we have the current layer, we have on and off, freeze and thaw, lock and unlock, and color. We'll come back and revisit layers in the next video, but I just wanted to give you an introduction on how layers work here.